the Native American tribes that they were, particularly the Iroquois Confederacy, that they were basing large parts of the Constitution on, and who were senior advisors, shall we say, to people like Ben Franklin and James Madison and Thomas Jefferson. Some of them were animists. Some of them had, they respected the goddess. They viewed the earth as a feminine force rather than a masculine force, or in addition to a masculine force. And they felt that there needed to be balance. And they were also looking at the Greeks, and they were also looking at the Romans, and they said, in Greek and Roman times there were goddesses as well as gods, particularly the Greeks. And so America should have, there were plenty of gods. I mean, there was the various major religions of the world, and they were all basically male-dominated. And so there was this idea to create a goddess. And they took the name, and you'll see, by the way, she is on the top of the Capitol building. There's a 19.5-foot statue of the goddess of America on top of the U.S. Capitol. And the idea was that she could take many different forms. In fact, there's an image of her in the Justice Department holding the scales with a blindfold on, and that John Ashcroft covered up with a drape. I thought that was ironic that here is John Ashcroft covering up liberty. She was referred to as Lady Liberty in that context, or the goddess of law. In some state capitals, I believe in Vermont where we lived, she's on the top of that Capitol building holding, as the goddess of agriculture, holding some wheat, some grains. You see her sometimes holding weapons of war, arrows, sometimes peace. She took many different forms. And they took the name Columbus, the guy who arguably discovered America, and was given credit for it anyway, and feminized his name, Columbia, and they named the goddess Columbia. And they wanted to give her a space in the United States that was so sacred that politics as usual couldn't be conducted there, where the people there were essentially dedicated to the goddess, and to the ideals of the nation, rather than to just ordinary politics. And so the people who lived in that particular place, that sacred place of the goddess, would not even be allowed to be represented in Congress. And they called this place the District of the Goddess Columbia. We refer to it as the District of Columbia. And she was on our coins right up until the 1950s, I think it was. Lady Liberty with the Walking Liberty. I believe she's on our coins. She might be on our coins again. I'm not sure with I haven't seen the new gold dollar that the government is publishing. So anyhow, I was reading this story about how the U.S. had created this goddess in the early founding of our nation, and it was fairly common knowledge throughout the late 1700s and throughout the 1800s that America had a goddess whose name was Columbia, and who was on top of the Capitol building, and who was on our coins, and we've referred to her as Lady Liberty, and there were songs sung to her and poems written to her. And I remember that morning when the space shuttle went down. I got up in the morning to do my writing. It was fairly early. I went out and got the newspaper and brought it in. We were living in Vermont at the time. Brought the newspaper in and set it on the table, and Louise had made some coffee, and the paper fell open to the front page, and here's this huge headline: Columbia dies over Texas. And my first thought was, George Bush from Texas, my first thought was, my God, George Bush has killed the goddess. I mean, it was just because that was, what was in my head. And then my second, and then I realized it was the space shuttle that they were talking about. You see the photo on the front page, and I thought, how ironic, and perhaps symbolic. This is, as I recall, this was before 9/11. That the goddess of democracy, or the space shuttle that was named after the goddess of democracy, would die over Texas, and Columbia dies over Texas. It was just a shocking headline. Anyhow, 1-866-303-2270. Anything Goes Friday. Daryl in Phoenix, Arizona, listening to KPHX. Hey, Daryl.